Time to get to work. Here in Adulting Week. In my Career Lessons from Alexander Hamilton video last week, I covered some of my tips around searching for a job, networking, and kind of getting yourself to the place that you really want to be work-wise. But what do you do when you get there? How do you make a good impression? How do you start off on the right foot? How do you really give it your all when you get to the job that you really, really want? First of all, ask questions. You've already been hired. You're not going to be fired for asking what you think is a dumb question. If you don't understand something, no matter how big or how small, find an appropriate person and just ask. In my first or second week at my job, I asked my boss, so how do we actually make money? And it turns out that that was a really good and complicated question that I otherwise never would have had the courage to ask. And those kinds of questions are not so easy to ask 1 or 2 or 3 years into your job, so ask what you want to ask and do it quickly. In fact, as a manager, I find asking questions and admitting when you don't know something to be one of the best indicators of who's going to be a successful employee and who is not going to be. Along those lines, you should set up regular meetings with your manager or your team. Get it now into the calendar. Again, it's awkward to set up if, 6 or 8 months into your job, you're like, hey, we should meet kind of regularly. So sit down with your boss or with your team and say, listen, how often should we meet? How do you like to communicate? Should you call if you have a question? Should you email? Just drop by his or her office? What are your boss's working hours? What are their expectations for your night or weekend availability? What's the protocol for telling your boss you need some time off? These are the kinds of things that, if unspoken, can really stress you out and make you feel paranoid or like you're not doing a good enough job. So get out in front of it. In your first month, you should be asking all of these questions and really establishing, with the excuse that you're the new person and don't know, all of these routines that would otherwise be those kinds of like nebulous, difficult social things for you to figure out on your own. And if you're like, hey Amanda, I've been at my job for 3 years, this is not helpful to me, that's fine. During a performance review or some other scheduled time when you should be going over your sort of history and your goals, that's the perfect time to say, listen, hey, this is awkward, lol, I know we never talked about this, but what are your preferences for X, Y, and Z? Or can we set up a regular meeting? You should also think about doing a weekly recap or goal list. During my first 6 months on the job, at the end of each week, I wrote out the list of things that I had done that week and my list of priorities for the next week. I emailed this list to my boss, again, during the first 6 months or so, but thereafter I've kept it up just for myself in a Word document. It's a really useful tool when performance evaluation time comes around. Again, that way you have a list of like, what actually have I been doing for the last 6 months. If your job doesn't have a handbook, you should create one. Along with the weekly recap, it'll be a useful record for you of what you actually do, all the work that you put in that people might think of as automatic, and it'll also help your team if you decide to leave or if you get promoted. If you give 2 weeks notice, there's going to be a lot to do, trust me, and the last thing on your mind is going to be writing down the step-by-step instructions of your day-to-day activities. We call this succession planning, and it's a really smart way to approach work in general. What are you doing to improve your workplace? How can you make this job easier for your successor? Constantly looking for ways to improve or make things easier should happen at your job as well as in your personal life. Seek out points of view that are different from your own, but also know when to stand up for yourself to people that are stressful or harmful or toxic. You can have someone in your office whose every single suggestion you intend on ignoring and even doing the opposite of, but if you understand where they're coming from, if you know the source of their frustration or their jealousy or their fear, it can make you a better negotiator and a better arguer for your own point of view. You can defend it better. So most of those tips are applicable to office jobs. If you're a freelancer, that's a whole nother can of worms. A beautiful can of worms, but a can of worms. And in a future video, I'm going to cover organizational tips for freelancers. So that's kind of my primary piece of advice and hard lesson that I've learned over the past couple of years of having side hustles and side businesses. You gotta be organized from the get-go. With your time, with your expenses, with your client management, with your goals. And I'll get to this in a future video, so freelancers and the self-employed out there, don't worry. That concludes your regularly scheduled programming for Adulting Week. I'm going to come at you tomorrow with my kind of extra credit bonus level 201 tips, and then again the following day with the Q&A. So please leave your questions in the comments. I'll see you there.